we hear that Anthropic was used by the Department of War to actually plan the attacks in Iran.
Well, one thing that's really, look, it's really clear that the people who control AI, the U.S. government and otherwise, can take out any world leader at any time now. The combination of satellites, AI to read every image, and universal cameras, it makes it possible to decapitate any country at any time. We proved from that twice in the last quarter. So the future of warfare is basically whoever controls AI chooses who gets to stay in power.
Dave, that's a really important point. One of the things I've mentioned before is we're living in a world where you can know anything, anytime, anywhere, right? It's a trillion sensor, over a trillion sensor planet right now with drones, orbital satellites, autonomous vehicles, gathering data, and then AI doing predictive analytics on what things are likely to be, even if you don't have data for it.
And well, I'll tell you one other thing. Sorry, Alex.
I was just going to say, maybe not even just a means to an end, but also, depending on which analysis of the Iranian situation you subscribe to, maybe an end to an end as well. If you look at Venezuela and the oil exports to China, and you look at Iran and the oil exports to China, the picture emerges, or at least one possible picture emerges, that what we're seeing is not just AI where Claude is being used to perform the Venezuelan operation, perform the Iranian operation as a means to some sort of arbitrary or nebulous geopolitical purpose, but actually, arguably, with China looming in the background and possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan and the risk to the semiconductor supply chain and Western AI that would cause, it may be the case that AI is also the end to the means to the end, and that what we're seeing more broadly is, in some sense, superintelligence being used to protect the future of Western superintelligence.
Yeah, and there's a window of opportunity, maybe a few months, to put some kind of structure around this globally, where you'll see later in the podcast that the models are improving at this like 3x, 4x reduction in parameter count, 10x increases in intelligence. Just every time we podcast, it's another step up. And we were already predicting, or I was anyway, that this is going to be 100x a year, just in terms of raw parameter count. But I think that's the lower bound now, looking at how just the beginning of the year has progressed. So there's a window of time where the power of AI that percolates out to every country in the world is going to be ridiculous by the end of this year. Create any virus you want, create any nuclear weapon you want, just working with your AI agent. So there's a window where we can start thinking about regulations that...
I love that deer. Not only that, sometimes there's 2 or 3 of them underneath the trampoline getting out of the rain. Intelligence.
Amazon makes a contingent offer to put $35 billion into OpenAI based upon them, first off, going public, and secondly, achieving AGI.
It's kind of incredible that we've financialized superintelligence, which is amazing.
The OpenAI to Microsoft definition of AGI was something like generating $100 billion in either earnings or revenue, I forget.
We're measuring compute in terms of gigawatts and AGI in terms of dollars. I love it. Amazon was all Anthropic for a while. Now they're OpenAI.
At some point, the circular economy becomes indistinguishable from the real economy, and I think that's what we're seeing here.
This is the entrepreneurial opportunity of a lifetime. We're talking about tens of thousands of times more capacity to create more money, more value created. Abundance is going to be absolutely rampant.
Now that's the moonshot, ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody, welcome to Moonshots, another episode of WTF Just Happened in Tech, the #1 podcast in AI and exponential technology, getting you ready for the future, getting you ready for the supersonic tsunami heading our way. I'm here with my extraordinary moonshot mates, Salim Ismail, DB2, AWG. Gentlemen, another week. We've gotten to a cadence of 2 of these per week. It feels like we're always leaving so many stories on the table. but let's do our best.
Yes, we need to actually move faster and faster and faster, just like the singularity itself, to keep up with everything.
Well, no tech company waits, no GPU waits. All right, let's jump in. Our top AI news stories: Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, Uber, accelerating at an extraordinary speed of change. Our first story for today: Anthropic revises responsible scaling policy amid increased competition. This was a story I put to the top of the conversation because it's very significant. And I had Jared Kaplan on stage at the Abundance Summit last year, the year before. Alex, you know Jared well. I think he was a roommate.
Yeah, he was a year behind me in the Harvard physics graduate program.
Yeah, what an amazing group of friends that you had. But here's the deal: they're dropping their 2023 pledge to not train advanced AI unless safety is guaranteed. And Jared's point, I think, logically, is if everyone else is rushing ahead, then us, sort of hampering ourselves doesn't make any sense. And I want to discuss this because it's concerning. A lot of us looked at Anthropic as the most responsible party out there, them and Google. Thoughts, gents?
Well,
safety feels
definitely
exponential races.
Yeah, there's lots of thoughts, all of you at once.
This is a metaphor for something, right? We're going to race to talk about a race condition. Love it.
Oh my God, amazing. I want to open with Salim here. Salim, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I mean, safety typically fails in exponential races. You could look at the whole thing writ large as OpenAI cracked open and let Pandora's box out. And so this is just the same type of dynamic occurring again. It speaks to the idea that technology is going to move at its pace, and we have to move our human structures at that pace. We can't fall behind.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, no, it's definitely history repeating itself. And so many of our MIT classmates went to Google back in 04, 05, 06 when it was Don't Be Evil.
Yeah.
And they went there over Microsoft because everyone perceived Microsoft as being evil. And Google was going to be the force of good in all of tech. And then, they bought YouTube, and then they built Chrome, and then they, what they promised the engineers early on, the ones that I knew anyway, is look, we will never store somebody's search history. Mm-hmm. How laughable is that in hindsight? So then they expanded out of search history. We're going to store that for 5 years. But we're also going to launch Chrome. Now we're going to look at all of your browsing history. Then we're going to buy DoubleClick. Then we're going to run targeted ads based on everything. Then we're going to do Gmail and read every email. Microsoft says they don't read your email, but Google says, well, we'll do what we want, but we won't pry too much. But they do read your email. And so that slippery slope of competition, corrupts the original mission statement gradually over time. I gave a whole presentation in Davos on how this evolves. And Dario wants nothing more than some rules. Yeah. And he's actually legitimately pissed that he has to actually repeal his own ethical standards to be competitive because there are no rules. And this is exactly how it has to evolve. Because Dario's in a position where he has to choose between being irrelevant, which doesn't help, mm-hmm. or repealing the original pledge, which he doesn't want to do. But it's better than being irrelevant.
Yeah, totally. Your earlier commentary, Dave, was really spot on. This is what Cory Doctorow calls enshittification. Right? So people promise something and then they gradually degrade it over time, and by the end of it, it's a shit show.
I love the way you encapsulate everything.
Yeah, there's no credible mechanism to slow the race right now, and so it's all out. Alex, what do you think about this?
I think there was no credible mechanism to guarantee safety in the first place. I think the entire premise was probably wrong. I think sort of the superficial gloss is, okay, we're in the Red Queen's race, and this is the race condition that everyone 10 years ago was scared of finding the world in, where we have a number of frontier labs all racing to do the terrible thing, that you build the thing and everyone dies. I don't buy that at all. I don't think this premise that either a heroic individual or a heroic frontier lab was ever going to be in a position to guarantee safety. And in fact, I remember back to the earlier days of the frontier labs, where the concern, and part of the reason why OpenAI was formed itself, was concern of a singleton. Competition is how we guarantee that there isn't going to be a singleton that dominates the future light cone with superintelligence. And I think similarly, the notion that there's going to be sort of unilateral safetyism, where single heroic individual, like one of the more prominent AI doomers, or a very safety-oriented frontier lab is somehow going to ensure safety throughout the forward light cone, that was never going to happen. Safety, to the extent we get it, is going to come from competition. It's going to come, I think, from a balance of powers and a separation of powers. And I think what we want is competition between the frontier labs, and maybe even to some extent competition between nation states, such as what we're seeing, to compete to do the best job for advancing humanity. And I think any unilateral safetyism is probably a dead end.
One of the questions is, will safety become an emergent property in some form or shape, right? So right now what we've seen is Anthropic go from a policy of we won't build it unless it's safe, that's been their policy, to we'll build it as safely as the competition is building theirs. And unfortunately it's a slippery slope, potentially down to the bottom. But it's
the mechanism for any kind of emergent property around it here.
well, we haven't seen the mechanism for emergent properties of what we've seen so far either.
Well, I
Yep,
would take
I'm
the position
dropping
that we
things
are,
again.
that in some sense, again, the fundamental flaw, I think, in the thesis that safety would originate from a heroic individual or heroic organization is, I would argue, it takes an entire civilization to align a superintelligence. We took all of humanity's content online and used it in compressed form to pre-train AGI, baby AGI, in the early days, like summer of 2020 with GPT-3. Why wouldn't it be reasonable to expect that it will take all of humanity to defensively co-align and co-scale superintelligence as well? It's not going to come from a single lab.
What do you think about Elon's point of view that we need to build ASI that is maximally truth-seeking as his mechanism for alignment and for safety?
I think that's just a fraction of what's needed. That addresses a very specific issue, which is, look, we don't want the AI to have one religion or to have one perspective on how you should live. We want it to be truth-seeking and have all opinions and we don't want to be censored. So that's definitely a problem, but it doesn't address the imminent job loss, the imminent consumerism. You know, the AI, people are conceding all of their most private information to the AI the same way they did with their Google search history. And it's accumulating that data, and people aren't fully aware of what it's going to do. It's going to turn around and start convincing you to do things. And so if you don't have rules in place, the natural, profit motive of the AI companies is to start selling you things. And you saw this with that Anthropic Super Bowl ad that we showed in the pod a couple.
Yeah, it was funny.
Unbelievable. I've showed everybody that ad now. But this is exactly where it's going to go if there are no rules. And so I completely agree with Alex's perspective that 10 years from now, after we've solved all physics, we've solved all math, we have global abundance, all of this is going to look silly 10 years from now. But in the 3-year timeline, massive job loss, total confusion, and massive rampant AI sales consumerism that has no regulation around it right now. It's going to be an absolute cluster.
Yeah, especially for the consumer, Dave, especially for the consumer-first companies that are needing to generate revenue.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, I actually, after that last pod, you showed that chart, Peter, that had Anthropic, growing 10x year over year, 26 billion in revenue forecasted this year, and on its current trend will be the first company to hit $1 trillion in revenue in history by 2029, 2030.
And exceed OpenAI this year.
And exceed OpenAI this year. Crazy numbers. But I said on the pod, that implies like a $30 billion or $30 trillion valuation. But then I ran it through Perplexity and it said, no, that implies a $1 quadrillion valuation using the current market price earnings ratio. Yeah. Like,
well, we discussed this a few podcasts ago that we'll see the first $100 trillion companies before the end of this decade. Anyway, I think that this is a more honest policy for Anthropic. End of the day.
Pauseism was never going to work. I mean, we all know a number of folks at MIT and otherwise who advocated for a 6-month pause just for the entire space to cool off and wait for safety to catch up. Did safety catch up? Whatever that means, not at all. If anything, that functioned as an accelerant to capabilities. I also think even in the DNA of Anthropic was originally founded as an exodus of OpenAI employees who were purportedly concerned about safetyism or lack thereof at OpenAI. So they start a safety/AI alignment oriented firm. Then they rapidly discover that the best way to do safety is to have your own models. And they discover the best way to have your own models is to raise a bunch of money to train your own models. And then they discover the best way to raise money to train your own models is to generate revenue. And the cycle completes where, yet again, an alignment-oriented firm becomes a capabilities firm. This happens over and over again. I would argue at this point, alignment and capabilities are inseparable. There's like a deep duality there.
Yeah. Did you see the new standard, by the way? It's Dario said, well, okay, we can't live by our original plan to not train advanced AI unless safety is guaranteed. So the new standard is we need to be as good or better than anyone else. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
that's a very different bar.
And we see, recently with the whole Department of War debacle with Anthropic and OpenAI cuts the deal. Anthropic, where does Anthropic stand right now in that whole conversation?
They're in limbo. I mean, I write about this every day in my newsletter. Anthropic is, at the moment, my understanding is they're in limbo. They're probably in negotiation with the Department of War, but they're otherwise in limbo and cut off as a supplier and considered. I'm not sure whether I think Dario and others have made some formal statements that they haven't received anything in writing yet from the Department of War, but my understanding is that this administration is considering them a supply chain risk. And at the same time, notably, OpenAI struck a deal.
Yeah, and at the same time, we hear that Anthropic was used by the Department of War to actually plan the attacks in Iran.
Well, one thing that's really, look, it's really clear that the people who control AI, the U.S. government and otherwise, can take out any world leader at any time now. The combination of satellites, AI to read every image, and universal cameras, it makes it possible to decapitate any country at any time. We proved from that twice in the last quarter. So the future of warfare is basically whoever controls AI chooses who gets to stay in power.
Dave, that's a really important point. One of the things I've mentioned before is we're living in a world where you can know anything, anytime, anywhere, right? It's a trillion sensor, over a trillion sensor planet right now with drones, orbital satellites, autonomous vehicles, gathering data, and then AI doing predictive analytics on what things are likely to be, even if you don't have data for it.
And
we'll take one other thing. Sorry, Alex.
I was just going to say, maybe not even just a means to an end, but also depending on which analysis of the Iranian situation you subscribe to, maybe an end to an end as well. If you look at Venezuela and the oil exports to China, and you look at Iran and the oil exports to China, the picture emerges, or at least one possible picture emerges, that what we're seeing is not just AI where Claude is being used to perform the Venezuelan operation, perform the Iranian operation as a means to some sort of arbitrary or nebulous geopolitical purpose, but actually, arguably, with China looming in the background and possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan and the risk to the semiconductor supply chain and Western AI that would cause, it may be the case that AI is also the end to the means to the end, and that what we're seeing more broadly is, in some sense, superintelligence being used to protect the future of Western superintelligence.
Yeah, and there's a window of opportunity, maybe a few months, to put some kind of structure around this globally, where you'll see later in the podcast that the models are improving at this like 3x, 4x reduction in parameter count, 10x increases in intelligence. Just every time we podcast, it's another step up. And we were already predicting, or I was anyway, that this is going to be 100x a year, just in terms of raw parameter count. But I think that's the lower bound now, looking at how just the beginning of the year has progressed. So there's a window of time where the power of AI that percolates out to every country in the world is going to be ridiculous by the end of this year. Create any virus you want, create any nuclear weapon you want, just working with your AI agent. So there's a window where we can start thinking about regulations that register the AI use cases and agents and chips and processing before chaos breaks out. But you can see that window is executable now, because you saw Venezuela, you're seeing Iran. Clearly there's this tipping point happening right now where, whether it's NATO or whether it's the United Nations or whether it's the US Congress, some entity needs to start formulating some structure around this because it's happening this year.
Yeah, I mean, people need to wake up. Salim, please go ahead, but I just want to say one thing. People have to wake up to the fact that AI is the single most important force impacting everything. Every single element of humanity right now is going to be accelerated, reinvented by this. Salim, go ahead, please.
Dave, it just struck me that you mentioned the Congress, the UN, NATO, probably the three most toothless entities on the planet today. So the thought that they would actually get together and do something, or anybody do anything, I think is low. I think we have to assume that it won't happen and look at the other side of that. One thing about the Anthropic case, there is a potential. I looked up an analysis. They do have a legal challenge potential, because the way that was classified is so ridiculous to make them an existential risk and all that, supply chain risk, etc., that they have legal recourse to fighting that, and they might win that.
Yeah, the thing about the legal recourse is that process is usually a 3-year-long window, which is hilarious.
It's ugly every which way. It's ugly every way. What I find really upsetting is that in this scenario, everybody loses.
Yeah,
There are no winners in this.
No, if there's no framework and no rules. It's a lot like the NFL was back, 20 years ago, when the defensive coordinators would pay bounties to the linebackers to take out the quarterback. Like, just take him off the field. I don't care if you break his legs, and take the 15-yard penalty. Who cares? Because then he's done for the season. The NFL said this is not good for business. Like, we need some rules.
I did not expect that pivot.
Well, that's where we are. They are right now. It's like, hey,
Agree.
Forget it. I don't want to go down there.
All right, let's continue with the Anthropic story. Hey everybody, you may not know this, but I've got an incredible research team. And every week, myself and my research team study the meta trends that are impacting the world. Topics like computation, sensors, networks, AI, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology. And these meta trend reports I put out once a week enable you to see the future 10 years ahead of anybody else. If you'd like to get access to the Meta Trends newsletter every week, go to diamandis.com/metatrends. That's diamandis.com/metatrends. I found this story pretty fascinating. So Anthropic expands Claude's agentic capacity. Two different sides to the equation here. Co-work gains scheduling, right? So this is a cron job. So Claude completes recurring tasks at specific times. For example, generating your morning briefing or spreadsheet updates or your Friday presentations. I mean, that element was very much what we saw in OpenClaw, right? And so it's interesting. And the second half of this is that Claude Code has enabled remote control. So you can kick off a task on your terminal and pick it up on your phone. You can control it from the Claude app or from a URL. And I'm wondering, this has probably been in the works for some time. So when Anthropic basically, tried to do the kibosh on Claude bot, I'm wondering if that was because they had this in the works. Basically, what OpenClaw has been doing is what Anthropic is just rolling out under a different approach.
Oh, for sure.
I'd take Anthropic at their face that this was, or OpenClaw, I guess, that the challenge was more trademark oriented than anything else. But I do think what have I been saying for weeks/days at this point that was distinctive about OpenClaw? It's the two things. It's headless, able to function autonomously for 24/7, and also that it's convenient to chat with via conventional messaging channels. And what do you see here with Co-work? Co-work is able to autonomously be scheduled headlessly. That's the headless part. And then remote control, that's the mobile messaging type part. But I think both of these are half measures. Like, I'm insufficiently motivated by each of these. I use Co-work from time to time, and I use Claude Code all the time. And neither of these, I think, is as compelling, at least conceptually, as a more OpenClaw-ish framework where all of these are cleanly packaged. And I think my guess is Anthropic and OpenAI and all of the other bigs will be forced to release their own sort of first-party OpenClaw competitor sometime in the next couple of months.
There's something I found very profound about this, plus our last conversation around OpenClaw and everything happening. I was thinking about over the last couple of days, something very profound is happening, which is the sheer democratization of compute power, right? Note the agency of an individual developer with a Mac Mini and running Quen locally and OpenClaw has unbelievable agency and decentralization now. Not controlled by any centralized authority, not controlled by any centralized command structure. They can essentially operate as they feel like. So this is an incredible independence and agency at the edge, which is going to really blow open innovation in a way that we...
60s, baby. Total democratization, total
and demonetization, as
Yeah.
we're seeing it happen, cascading down, as Dave mentioned earlier.
Ironically, from China.
Yes,
Yeah.
ironically.
Ironically,
from China, and then one other nugget, Peter, your theory is 100% right. Anthropic, why didn't Anthropic just throw out something better than OpenClaw a year ago? It can and will delete things off your laptop. And so all these OpenClaw users, including my kids, including me, actually have separate laptops or separate Mac Minis, including Alex Finn, in our podcast we just did. They run it on isolated hardware. Anthropic couldn't really contemplate throwing out a product, then say, yeah, but run it on separate hardware. How are you going to do that? So this creates a huge entrepreneurial opportunity, though. If you say, listen to what Alex said a second ago, OpenClaw is unbelievably compelling. And anyone who's started down that path will never go back, right? It's just, you'll never give up your Jarvis once you have a Jarvis.
Have any of you played with Perplexity's computer?
I've been hearing really good things. I've not tried it yet.
I looked at the demo. I think it's an interesting step in the direction of councils for everything, and I've had so many people over the past few months ask me for something like Perplexity's computer, where they're right now, if you have a given task, they'll manually go to the top 3 or 4 frontier models, ask them for independent opinions, and then try to synthesize that into one coherent whole. And that is essentially what Perplexity Computer tries to automate. There are others in the space as well. But I think even there, that it's nice sort of sugar, syntactic sugar, if you will, around the existing models. But I don't think it's transformative. I think ultimately, even this ability to counsel up or to create juries around lots of competing models, that's just going to be table stakes, as with so many other forms of scaffolding.
Did you just say syntactic sugar?
It's a term of art in computer science.
It goes way back.
But Alex, I think the point you made a minute ago is brilliant, and Dave, I think you were saying this as well. All of the big players, all the hyperscalers, all the frontier models are going to have to develop some version of OpenClaw, because it's going to become the de facto. Every person's going to have their own version of Jarvis.
Yes.
Yeah.
But remember, it's really expensive too. This is part of the reason, it's not the only reason, for running, say, Quen locally under an OpenClaw scaffold. That's a lot of compute if you have one or more agents that are running constantly for you. I'm not sure Anthropic in its present state even has the cloud infra to be able to launch a product like that. And I think in many cases, Anthropic, OpenAI, the others are probably just waiting around for their infra to catch up with applications like that before they launch it.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, this is the entrepreneurial opportunity of a lifetime, though. Anybody who jumps in, and there's so many different versions, so many different things to play with. But when you go to JP Morgan, Justin Milligan, who just joined us, his division at JP Morgan was only allowed to use GPT-4.
Wow.
Like, are you kidding me? And he couldn't take it. He's like, this is ridiculous. But no one has figured out, okay, but how can I use it in this highly secure, inside the firewall, inside JP Morgan environment? And Dario's not going to answer that question. And the OpenClaw team isn't going to answer that question. And they want everyone to thrive who uses their platforms. They don't want to kill every job. They want any early adopter to thrive as they thrive. And Dario, if he hits a $250 billion valuation, doesn't need more money. He needs to not destroy every job in America or in the world. And so this is really entrepreneurial heaven if you can figure out, how do I get what I can use right here on my Mac Mini, and it can clearly solve all these problems. How do I get that inside a real world use case without breaking everything, without regulatory problems? Many, many, many job opportunities in that team.
One of the challenges still with Claude's agentic capacity is giving AI recurring unsupervised access to your workflows means that either there are going to be a bunch of errors, or you're going to be spending all your time checking the work before you hit publish. It's still going to keep the human still in the loop to assure quality or alignment, there will be a point at which you trust it completely, but we're not there yet.
This is Economics 101, or I should say Microeconomics 101. When the cost of one good falls to near zero, the value of the complementary good increases. So as the value, or I should say as the cost of generation of content becomes post-scarce, which is exactly what we're seeing, that increases the value of its complement, which is verification, for now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, going to our next story, Claude, in keeping on the Claude theme, Claude gains co-work plugin templates for finance, banking, and HR. So this is fascinating, right? Anthropic is building enterprise agent marketplace. It's department-level AI infrastructure, and it's taking down company after industry. We've seen the decimation of a number of players out there. What are you thinking about this?
So I wouldn't interpret this as, when Microsoft launches an assault on the relational database, it's a big, multi-billion-dollar investment. Here, Anthropic can build these connectors and adapters, vibe code them in probably an hour, and anyone else can too. So I wouldn't perceive it as, Anthropic is taking over all banking software. It's just so easy to build the stuff now that you might as well roll out all that functionality. So I wouldn't overread into the intent behind it. But
I don't think it's intent. I'm just saying,
the implications are profound, though.
Yeah.
So I've got two thoughts. One is every department now becomes like a programmable intelligence layer,
yes.
right? And basically all prescriptive logic in companies collapses into these AI agent roles. And the real prize here is enterprise orchestration, not so much chatbots, but autonomous workflow networks. Because this is what I talked about last time. This is the organizational singularity. We go from human-centric approvals, hop to hop to hop, human to human to human, to agentic workflows with human beings doing oversight, dashboard monitoring, and exception handling.
A couple of comments on this one. If you actually look at what these plugins are that Anthropic's launching that are causing the so-called SaaSpocalypse and reducing, carving $1.5 trillion off of market caps of various software companies, they are absurdly simple. They're just a bunch of MCP, model control protocol wrappers, and a bunch of skills with a set of bullets for how to go about carrying out different job industry roles or labor categories. This is not that complicated. I'm reminded, remember the scene in The Matrix, the villain is busy unplugging people without their cooperation from the Matrix, killing them in the process, and one of them says, "Not like this, not like this." That's basically what we're seeing, where these are just simple text files in many cases that are reducing single-handedly the market multiple, the trading multiple of entire industries. I think on the one hand, it's incredible that a simple text file can say chop 10% of the value off of a CRM firm, at least market value. On the other hand, these, as pointed out earlier, these plugins and the marketplaces of the plugins are so absurdly simple that I would reasonably expect these plugins are going to get just built in, since they're just scaffolding anyway, built into the next baseline version of the model and won't even need to exist independently in the future.
But, Alex, I think the interesting point here is a year ago, if you had delivered this as an entrepreneur, you'd be out in the market raising at multi-billion-dollar valuations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
It's called hyper-deflation for a reason, Peter.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I just want people to be aware that, the moat for an entrepreneur coming forward with something amazing, that we're going to reinvent the entire HR industry or the investment banking industry, and, raising at a $4 or $5 billion valuation, it's basically that moat's gone months or a year later.
I think it's really important, though, to step back and look at the macro every now and then and say, look, abundance is going to be rampant. We're talking about tens of thousands of times more capacity to create more money, more value created. Abundance is going to be absolutely rampant. And there's no reason to be afraid, even though, like if you're a CRM company, your 20-year future cash flows from recurring maintenance revenue is suddenly gone.
Yeah.
That's true, but the opportunity to pivot and thrive is bigger than ever. And so I think a lot of people there'll be a ton of volatility because people haven't mapped to the new reality yet. but opportunity is bigger, not smaller overall.
But that agility,
Salim, you-
that agility is fundamental to large organizations' success. I talked about on the last pod the asteroid hitting the Earth and changing the environment so rapidly, and the slow-lumbering dinosaurs going extinct. That's exactly what we're talking about here. I mean, Salim, do you think that we can see large companies pivoting, rapidly enough?
Zero.
Zero
They will
chance.
not be able to do it. I mean, look, we've seen this throughout history. It doesn't work. I think where you end up is, not to throw another metaphor at this, but you end up where we saw with Google Ads, where you kind of took out the advertising market massively, and then Google Ads becomes like a coral reef with lots of little species feeding off the reef. And if you're the reef, then you're in great shape. But in this case, the reef itself is disappearing as we can decentralize completely to one-off computers running things. There are people using OpenClaw to go to small businesses, sitting down in front of them and automating workflows live for small businesses. This is like incredible what's going on.
You know what else, Salim? There are a lot of private equity funds that are coming at us now saying, hey, big companies never change quickly. Wait, this big company could be a small company very quickly because we don't need all these people. Now we have a small company with huge cash flow. Wow. So
there will be a PE fund emerging shortly, or if it's not there already, that is going to buy up kind of medium-sized big companies and set up a digital twin infrastructure on the side where you have an AI native digital twin and you just move workflows over to it, and you'll collapse the cost of running that organization by about 3 to 5x.
Well, that's what MacroHard is about.
Already exists. I've started multiple companies like that. I've even tried to popularize a term for it. I call it an IBO, an AI buyout. We've seen multiple PE firms doing that. Like, this is table stakes at this point.
Yeah, and of course, MacroHard's vision is, I'm going to come in and digitize your entire employee base and operate it.
That's for pure software plays, but I think we're going to start to see this in real
in the physical world.
Potatoes.
Like Project Prometheus from Jeff Bezos is attempting to do this for industrial firms.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the point here is large companies need to take action right away. So, Salim, what's your advice for a large company, a CEO listening, and seeing this coming their way? What do they do?
Exactly what Alex just said. You set up an AI native digital twin on the edge. You run an immune system 10-week sprint to block the response from the mothership. You grow this thing and slowly move workflows over, or as quickly as you can. You do a combination of bottom-up and top-down workflows. And the real shift in people's heads needs to be that instead of human-centric workflows, which is what it's been like for the last 150 years, we now move to agentic workflows where you can get things done much more effectively with hordes of little agents, 2 layers, strategic layer and an execution layer, and then human beings doing oversight, exception handling, etc. Because coordination costs go to near zero, execution costs go to near zero, and in and outside the firm. The future of the firm becomes a legal fiduciary liability purpose holder.
And
also,
there's
Salim, I know you're a big fan.
two other things real quick. The first is your brand. If it's reasonably good still, you own your brand and you own those customer relationships for the moment.
I think it's worth also rereading Clay Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, which exactly addresses this. Salim, I know you're a big fan. We all should be. The Innovator's Dilemma contemplates, hey, every 10 years something truly disruptive is going to obliterate whatever you do. And here's how you should react to it in that moment. But now instead of every 10 years, it's going to be every 10 months, and then soon it'll be every 10 weeks, and then it'll be every 10 days pretty soon too. But the playbook is still the same. Read The Innovator's Dilemma, invest in the new thing, use your capital leverage in your installed base to invest in the new thing.
I just got off a board call for one of my portfolio companies, and my comment to my board and to all boards out there is you have got to give your CEO top cover to be dramatic in their modification of the business, because and you have. I know
you're either the disruptor or you're disrupted.
Yeah,
And it's for everyone.
right now.
You get founder mode. You get founder mode.
Yes, I mean that's
right.
basically it.
Right.
If the company and the board and the CEO are not in founder mode and willing to do dramatic surgery on the company, you're dead. You're walking dead in any industry.
I'd also be remiss, Peter, if I didn't point out here we are basically on the eve of abundant knowledge work, of course, being cooked, knowledge work about to be post-scarce, and here we are bringing our hands over where to find scarcities in knowledge work as is about to become abundant. I just want to point out the irony.
Such an extraordinary time to be alive. All right, talking about disruption coming out of China, Alibaba's 35 billion parameter Qwen 3.5 medium outpaces 235 billion Qwen 3 in benchmarks. The power of small open weight models. So, Alex, to you, buddy.
This is happening in Western models too. The difference is when, say, OpenAI launches a mini model or Google DeepMind launches a flash model, they don't advertise the parameter count, so it's not as viciously obvious as it is when a Chinese frontier lab launches an open weight model. We get to see the benefits of distillation in a successor model, but it's striking. We're seeing almost 10x reductions in parameter count while maintaining capabilities or even increasing capabilities. And the broader picture, just to keep in mind, is the capability density of models is increasing. And this goes hand in hand with what we've talked about in the past, Sam Altman's comment about 40x year over year hyper-deflation of costs at constant capability. In this case, my mind immediately goes to what's the end game here? If we can see an increase in capabilities with a reduction from 235 billion parameters to 35 billion parameters, what does the end game look like? Where does this end? Does it end up...
made this point during our podcast with him. If you remember that, Dave.
For sure. And yeah, he said he asked his research team not to give him parameter count anymore, just give me bytes.
Yeah.
Because, they keep quantizing and shrinking the file size. I had a lot to say about that, but I bit my tongue because that perspective isn't right either. But Alex predicted this a long time ago. I don't know how you saw this coming, but there's.
I just look at the scaling law curves and extrapolate.
Yeah. Well, it's.
In this case,
funny. I was on the treadmill this morning watching old Moonshots podcasts, and I'm like, wow, that was like so long ago. And I look at the timestamp, and it was only like 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Like, holy crap, things are changing so quickly. But Alex, you said this. I think you're the first person I ever heard from it saying, look, the equivalent of a GPT-5 is going to be maybe 30, 40 billion parameters, but it could get as low as 1 or 2 billion truly. Because right now when they train that caliber of model, it has all this junk knowledge in it too. Not core thinking junk, Twitter feeds and Kardashian news and all that other junk.
Exactly.
But strip that out, this could get very small and very tight and very fast.
It could get way smaller than a billion. I mean, I can imagine scenarios where it's only a few million parameter equivalents. That's sort of the core microkernel of AGI or superintelligence, and the rest lives in a flat text database or something.
Well, that will, another thing Elon said is we're not as smart as we think we are. If you get superhuman intelligence down to a couple million parameters, you're like, wow, we're really not that smart.
Yeah, the first person I heard speak about this was actually Iman Mustak, speaking about what you can get onto your phone. We'll see that in a moment. I mean, so my question is this bad news for the big compute incumbents, right? If massive data centers are being invested right now,
this is so good for the startup community. It's fantastic, but you still need the big models.
Well, it comes down to something Alex also talks about a lot, which is, do we have boundless problems we can solve? Like if you get everything to be 100 times faster this year, you can just do that much more. Do we actually run out of things to do? Is physics infinite or is physics finite? Is human benefit infinite or is it finite? And we'll find out, I guess, in a year. But my guess is no. Every time you shrink the model and make it faster, you're still going to use every single chip in that data center just for the next thing. Especially when you start getting to the full cell simulator and all the health stuff that everyone's really eager to do. I mean, that is very, very compute intensive. And
Peter, I thought 64 kilobytes should be enough for anyone.
Exactly.
Oh, the good old days. Check out this. So I saw this on X this morning. So this is Qwen 3.5 running on an iPhone 17 Pro on airplane mode. And this is extraordinary. So it's a 2 billion parameter 6-bit model running on Apple Silicon. So imagine you're any place on the planet, you don't have Wi-Fi, but you've got Quen on your device, and it's got all the intelligence you need. I find
just
this, yeah,
like
go ahead, Alex.
seeing demos like this in my mind underline either, depending on whether you want to see it as competence or otherwise, how much of an opportunity Apple has to finally take the lead with local models, or conversely, how far behind they are in terms of taking the lead in terms of local models. But either way, clearly there's this enormous overhang. We could be running enormously competent reasoning models locally on all of our recent iPhones. The fact that it's not yet baked into the operating system, obviously, and is very publicly embarrassing, maybe one wants to call it, for Apple. On the other hand, lots of rumors that this time around, finally with Gemini integration, they're on the critical path and they'll finally launch
Finally,
something.
Siri will not suck anymore.
Apple Intelligence, however they brand it.
Note that the local ability able to go offline means it's unstoppable, it's uncensorable. I mean, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, that's the ultimate barrier too, because if this can get to the level this year where it can do a gain of function virus, it can do a chemical weapon, and it all fits into a tiny little package. With nuclear proliferation back in the 1950s, there was a theory that, hey, if these physicists keep chugging along, they're going to make something the size of a grenade that has the power of an H-bomb. And then thankfully that didn't happen. It just, the physics didn't allow it. But the AI is not going to stop like that. The AI is going to keep getting faster and denser and more compact. And the window of opportunity to put rules and regulations around this is very, very narrow now. It's got to be this calendar year.
What do you think is going on at the White House, in Congress, in the Department
we've
of
seen
War?
this conversation before, right? We had the head of one of the big agencies, the head of innovation of one of the big agencies at Singularity, Peter. You probably remember this. And
I do.
We asked him, how do you think about this when somebody could design a virus on an iPhone, something, etc. And he said, look, and it was a much more clever answer than I thought he would give, which was, when you have kind of nuclear weapons, you know how many there are, you know where they are, you put eyes on it, you try and track it as much as possible, great. When you've got something that's this democratized, what they're actively doing is opening up these communities. So they went to the biohacking communities and funded them to open up. Because if you're trying to do something dodgy, you kind of need to collaborate with a few people, and the conversations surface very quickly. And then the community does self-policing, self-reporting. Somebody's doing something dodgy, asking a few people they point it out, etc., because it's in their best interest. And it's actually worked very, very well so far. What happens when you get to this level is unclear, but I think the general trend has been very positive so far.
I'll tell you one other thing. The way this evolved with financial services being self-regulated is, we think of it right now as, the federal government is incompetent, they're not doing anything. The researchers over at Anthropic are brilliant, they're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's going to end up being the same people. And this is the way it worked out with the SEC. When you go, who works at the SEC? It's the same guy that was at Goldman Sachs yesterday, doing his 2 years at the SEC, or her 2 years at the SEC, and then going back to Goldman Sachs. That's the way it's going to be with AI too. Right now, nothing is happening at the White House. David Sachs is there though, you've got one brilliant guy. What's going to happen next is Anthropic people and OpenAI people are going to actually be the people working in the self-regulating agency. And so the people will have to bounce back and forth, and they'll do it because they're worried. They're conscious of the impact of not doing it.
Yeah, still concerning, right? Still concerning to have this level of capability offline.
We know how to handle decentralized capabilities already. We have printers. In some cases, states are trying to regulate 3D printers, and before 3D printers, we had 2D printers that could be used for counterfeiting. We have.
But Alex, we baked software into all of those printers, right? There was a standard that was created for.
There were the yellow dots.
For any, for Canon, for HP, for any printer that detected you trying to, photocopy, money, it wouldn't allow that. So the question is, if we're talking about open weight models out of China that we don't control the software on, how do you bake in protection there?
There are so many different ways that one can defensively co-scale against 2 billion parameter 6-bit models running on someone's iPhone. We've already talked about some of them. There are other ways. In the scheme of things, I don't think sort of these edge devices running tiny Chinese open weight models, either individually or collectively, pose an enormous hazard to the market. Like they're just not that capable relative to the other models that are out there.
I think the frustration is that the solutions are relatively obvious to Alex. We've had this at this meeting at the State House before, where it's like, look, guys, it's not that hard. Here's what we need to do, and then nothing happens. That's the frustration. But registering the models, registering the compute, tracking the GPUs and where they are, it's all very doable. The ideas are not.
And defensive co-scaling of making sure that the most flops are going to good purposes rather than bad purposes. I'm reminded, I think it was the New Yorker cartoon, guy is up late at night at his computer saying, oh, I can't come to bed, someone somewhere said something wrong on the internet. We can't get so bothered by the fact that someone somewhere might be doing something wrong with a $2 billion parameter model on it.
I've got so many agents running now,
Bingo.
and I put in place a little rule that said, hey, before any process launches, write a mission statement and store it next to your code. And
Really?
it solves so many problems. I can go back and read the mission statement and say, hey, what the hell are you working on anyway? Well, read my mission statement. Like, wow. That makes no sense, or that makes tons of sense. It's so simple. Like, because the AI is the first self-documenting, self-improving, self-cleaning thing in the world.
Employee, right?
Yeah. Just a couple simple little things like that will solve all these problems.
Have you told the employees to do the same?
Actually, yes. It's a little bit different. It's, look, whatever you're doing, make sure that it's in a written document that the AI can see too. I don't want any opaque activity. Because if the AI can't see it, then I don't want to see it. I want everything to be on the same page with us and the AIs.
Salim, want to close this out here? Salim?
I think a key point that we have to remember is the ratio of good to bad.
Yeah.
We worry about the downside, and we should worry about the downside. And the amplitude of the negative is getting bigger and bigger as people can run these models. But I always go back to the eBay Craigslist example, where when you could first do eBay or Craigslist at scale, you could see human nature at scale. And so anthropologists and sociologists studied the transactions at eBay and Craigslist. You can master your email address pretty well. On eBay, I can throw up a picture of a MacBook, grab your $1,000 and I'm off to Fiji, right? So what's the actual ratio? What is the real true nature of humanity? And by studying these systems at scale, Kijiji in Canada, Mercado Libre in Argentina, Craigslist, eBay, they found that the ratio is consistently 8,000 to 1, meaning there's 8,000 positive transactions on eBay for each fraudulent transaction. That should give you incredible optimism for the future of humanity.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's move us along here. Let's head to the Googleverse. Google releases Nano Banana 2. So this is running on Gemini 3.1 Flash. It's 4K resolution. It's at 0.045 cents per image. That's a price point that's cheaper than stock
4
images.
cents an image.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's 4.5 cents per image. Excuse me. It's cheaper than buying stock images. And so is this the end of commercial photography, illustrators, stock image platforms? Probably.
We're just getting started here, and I think maybe buried underneath the headline, but in the release documentation, this is the first image model from Google that combines a reasoning model, which I think they used slightly flowery language for, but basically the reasoning power of Nano Banana Pro with the instantaneity, I think they might have just said with the speed of Gemini Flash model. So under the covers, I think this is really interesting. It's combining probably some sort of diffusion model that we get with reasoning capabilities. And I think achieving the cost reductions of a diffusion model with nonetheless the capabilities of reasoning, we're going to see this spread from images, where it's mostly right now in video, back to text, back to code. There are a few other labs, smaller labs, that have started to make pretty loud announcements about how they're achieving purported 5x, 10x cost reductions or speed increases using diffusion models instead of autoregressive transformers. But I think this is probably the tip of the iceberg for some final consolidation of autoregressive transformers, which are used for cogen and natural language for the most part on the one hand, and then diffusion models and diffusion transformers on the other hand that are used for images and audio and video. We're just going to finally get one consolidated architecture at the end of the day that does everything.
Yeah. I mean, this is the wake-up call for people to remember that whatever you're seeing, you cannot necessarily believe it. Every pixel is going to be AI generated at the end of the day. Salim, thoughts?
I mean, the cost drop is incredible. People are just going to do so much more with it. Democratization of creativity, great, love it, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I don't know if you guys know, but the curve on intelligence is just ridiculous. But on diffusion models, I don't really know. I know they've gotten a lot faster and cheaper in the last few months, but it doesn't feel like the same type of algorithm. Like it may hit a wall. I don't know. Do you guys know?
OpenAI has been investing, this is in the published literature, investing a lot of effort, and probably DeepMind as well, maybe slightly less prominently, in trying to avoid the need for many iterations on a diffusion model. So a diffusion model normally, conventionally, takes many iterations to start from pure noise and refine the pure noise into the final image or the final video. There was a lot of interest that was publicly available, call it 6 to 12 months ago, from OpenAI and some other folks as well, to see if they could just one shot or two shot straight from pure noise to the final image. I do think, to your point, Dave, I think, although I haven't seen, maybe in the past 2 to 3 months, any scaling laws for diffusion models, prior to that, I saw a ton of work on scaling laws for diffusion models, and diffusion models have scaling laws too. Everything has scaling laws.
Yeah. You know, Ahmad would know all about this too. Let's pick his brain next week in LA.
Absolutely.
He's
It's the new standard is go to Nano Banana 2 and ask it to generate imagery. So imagery becomes free effectively, and you can. I mean, it used to be my current workflow. My previous workflow was I'd go to Google Images and hope I found something. Right now, everything is created from scratch, and it's perfect. I love this image in this slide here of Elon with Sam and Dario and the whole leadership team of all the hyperscalers.
Alex, you should be in there, man. You gotta raise your game here. One more notch.
We're running out of scarcities, but maybe appearing in that image is one of the scarcities our civilization has left.
We can make that happen for you, for sure. All right, continuing on with our friends at Google, Gemini can now automate some multi-step tasks on Android devices. So Gemini is now an on-device agent that can navigate real apps and complete real transactions. Handle DoorDash, McDonald's, Starbucks for you. So, interesting, significant. What do you guys think?
I think it's hugely significant.
Expected.
Well, look, there's been a long time since there was a feature function on the phone that threatened Apple in any way, but AI is it. And if you try to use Siri to do something constructive while you're driving, it's just so painfully impossible. Also, when you start an AI dialogue and you're in the middle of the conversation, the thought process, you don't want it to go away. It's addictive and productive, and if it follows you on your phone and seamlessly, it's just incredibly empowering. So if Google wins that race with Android, they might actually chip away at the iPhone profit dominance for the first time. Now keep in mind that they also need the duopoly for antitrust reasons, so neither company can afford to completely annihilate the other one. They need some parity in the balance on the force.
Out of it, I saw the data. I mean, we've seen a significant drop-off in mobile phones, right, in terms of mobile phone purchases. And that will be displaced, of course, by headwear and earwear and all kinds of devices that are beyond just your phone.
Well, I think a lot of that is because...
the reason the phone sales dropped off is because they didn't have a function or a feature that everyone was clamoring for. Because people used to get a new phone when the cameras were improving like crazy. They'd get a new phone every 18 months to 2 years. Now it's like, well, I can sit on this phone for 3 years, 4 years. I'm not even noticing the difference. But again, AI could completely change that, the neural chips. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
I think there's also a supply side element where the rising cost of memory is making phones in some cases more expensive, and we're seeing, I think, a generational transition from smartphones absorbing the silicon and absorbing TSMC's output over to AI data centers as the new
Sure.
form factor for computers away from this, but just narrowly on Gemini for multi-step tasking on Android, this is what Siri was originally supposed to be about. And before Siri, this is what the DARPA personal assistant that learns, or PAL, was supposed to deliver. We've known how to do this in some abstract sense for a decade plus. What was missing, why you ask, are we only getting this now? I always like to ask, why do things take so long? Why can't they be faster? In this case, I really think it was about a combination of reasoning models and vision language models that could fit compactly onto a personal device. And we're getting that now, finally, and it's going to be everywhere, but we really should have had this functionality, even without the ability to read the screen and understand arbitrary applications. We should have had this 10 years ago, and that's borderline inexcusable.
I think what's most significant here is the fact that Google has a huge installed base of phones, right, of Android phones, and the ability to take their AI systems and that installed base. OpenAI doesn't have that, Anthropic doesn't have that, and it's going to be a massive differentiator for Google.
Apple has it. Apple could have had it.
Apple could have had it.
I'm a long-time Android user, so I'm super excited by this because this.
Yeah, you turn all my iMessages green. It pisses me off.
Apologies for ruining your visual field sphere, Peter. But this is like agency at the operating system level, which I think is amazing. And it also means that commerce APIs are becoming machine-to-machine first and human second, right? So you'll have less friction in consumer flows. This is going to reshape marketplaces over time. So it's really exciting.
All right, next article is a real fun one. Amazon makes a contingent offer to put $35 billion into OpenAI based upon them, first off, going public, and secondly, achieving AGI. Enter Salim with his normal rant. What the hell is AGI?
I mean, you know, it's kind of incredible that we've financialized superintelligence, which is amazing. Having AGI as a financial milestone is unbelievable, given we have no idea. I mean, it's great that intelligence has become a balance sheet trigger. That's incredible. But this is so weird. And thank goodness it says or.
Well, Alex, doesn't the agreement between OpenAI and Microsoft requires OpenAI to give the source code and all of the intellectual property to Microsoft until AGI? Do you think they use the same definition of AGI?
I suspect it's something similar. So the definition, my understanding based on public reporting of the OpenAI to Microsoft definition of AGI went through several iterations, with the most recent iteration prior to their, I think, for-profit transition being, and Celine, maybe you'll like this, it did actually have a definition. It was something like generating $100 billion in either earnings or revenue, I forget. So maybe we need to coin like AGI as a unit of currency, like an AGI is $100 billion of earnings or something.
We're measuring compute in terms of gigawatts and AGI in terms of dollars. I love it.
That's right.
Listen, that's fine. That's just all they've done is substituted an earnings plateau for that, which is fine. It's good.
So this is interesting, right? This is $50 billion. It dwarfs Microsoft's $13 billion investment. And what, again, I'm going back to what is Amazon
I would
doing
like
here?
to make the point which we made earlier, which is that a lot of this is Amazon credits. So,
Yeah.
Which is fine, because that's how they would have spent it anyway.
There are lots of tendrils going both directions from Amazon to OpenAI and back based on public details of the announcement, like the requirement that OpenAI will use Amazon's Trainium or Trainium 2 chips for training. It's good for Amazon. It's good. Amazon has a long and storied history of purchasing their own customers in some sense, in some cases literally acquiring them, but in many cases paying for the information and the learnings that come from having a customer that's using Amazon as the world's most customer-centric company. And in this case, Amazon arguably missed the frontier AI boat. And so paying to deal themselves back into the game is, I think, par for the course. They're up to $50 billion of investment is at far worse terms than, say, Microsoft's original billions when Microsoft was much earlier in the game. And I think this is just the price of reestablishing themselves at the infra level of the party. And it's also been reported that as part of this deal, Amazon will get customized versions of OpenAI's models internally. Amazon will get to host as the exclusive third-party cloud host OpenAI's Frontier suite of automated AI coworker employees. So Amazon will get a lot out of this too.
I mean, this is so incestuous, what's going on right now. I mean, and Amazon was all Anthropic for a while. Now they're OpenAI.
You say incestuous, but go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Well, the U.S. public market, all companies combined, is about 50 trillion. The AI companies are 20 trillion of the 50 trillion now. So, it's incestuous, but it's like, if that 20 trillion becomes 30, 40 trillion, which it inevitably will, it's the majority of the market is just 7 companies. So when they do a lot of deals with each other, it's like, well, is that incest?
That's where the money is.
It's the whole freaking economy is those handful of
I also think maybe, I would say incestuous, not perhaps the word I'd use for this, maybe circular is what we're gesturing at.
Yeah.
But even that, that's not my take at all. In this case, I see competition, and I also see horizontal stratification. That if Amazon is striking deals with Anthropic, but also with OpenAI, and OpenAI is moving some of its workload from Microsoft Cloud to Amazon and also to Google TPU clouds, that to me looks like the market for infrastructure for the frontier labs is very competitive. That's great for the economy. And B, it's starting to horizontally stratify. So if OpenAI is feeling impulses not just to vertically integrate down to the data center layer itself, but is so compute starved that it needs to, following the law of comparative advantage, needs to outsource some of its compute to Amazon with its Trainium architecture and Google with its TPUs, that's a sign, if anything, that there's such insatiable demand for compute that it's raining on everyone, even with perhaps less loved compute architectures.
But there's an interesting thing in negation here, which is XAI is missing in all these conversations, right? So Elon is going 100% alone.
Elon loves vertical integration.
And he doesn't play well with others. He loves...
Yeah, and it's interesting that the big money we saw with Anthropic is in the corporate use case, corporate white-collar use case. People trust 2 clouds. They trust 3, I guess if you count Oracle. They trust the AWS cloud in a big way, and they trust the Microsoft cloud, Azure. And I guess they sort of trust Oracle too.
Not Google Cloud?
No, Google Cloud, a bunch of our companies have been kind of bribed by Google to use Google Cloud. As Alex was saying, they'll pay you to switch, and some have taken it. But for the most part, Google spies on everything. It's their terms of service never say they won't do anything. If you read any terms of service from Google on any product, it says we may do this, we may do that, we may do the other, which kind of implies they won't do other things. But if you read the legal, they literally don't restrict themselves in any way whatsoever from doing anything.
It's honest.
And Microsoft, it's very corporate unfriendly.
Honest, you're right.
Yeah. But Microsoft legitimately says, no, we will not steal your data. No, we will not steal your intellectual property. No, we will not read your email if you use Outlook. And AWS is even more, so people trust those clouds, and then they want their AI model to be inside that trusted container inside the cloud. So far it's just been Claude on AWS. Everyone's running away with Claude on AWS. So all of a sudden, for reasons, I don't know, maybe just variety, maybe not having Microsoft and OpenAI be just bedfellows by themselves. Amazon's going way out of massive $50 billion move here to get 2 options on the AWS.
Do we know what the valuation of this round is?
I think the reported valuation of OpenAI's overall round was $730 billion pre.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, this is not going to be a big risk. I mean, when OpenAI goes public, it's likely to go public, north of $1 trillion. So you'll get a quick pop, and it's probably, what do we have 3 big IPOs coming up. SpaceX is, anticipated maybe as early as next month, I heard.
That's right.
And then we'll have Anthropic, and then we'll have OpenAI. So, I mean, if you can get a 50% pop in your price shares in 6 months, that's incredible investment.
That's not investment advice for anyone who's going to misconstrue that.
Well, hey, listen, I will give investment advice for people to get 50% in 6 months. I mean, why not? Just
not investment advice from me, it's from Peter.
Okay. listen, if anybody can get a 50% return in 6 months in any deal, that's pretty damn good.